Okay, well, it's been a very long time since we've had this class. I want to welcome you to the practical prayer class number 8. And today's class is the 3 standing prayers. So if you take a look in the priority and prayer chart, which I'm going to share with you in just a second. All right, so now you should see the priority in prayer chart. And if you look at that chart, you'll see that we've covered everything through the 5th column. The 6th column adds the brachot before the Shema. After Yishtabach, which is the last bracha of Pezukei de Zimra, there is a Kaddish. Now, just a reminder, Kaddish is only said in a minyan, and we're going to be looking at Kaddish at the end of today's class. So for right now, we're just going to skip over that. The next thing you will see in your siddur is an invitation called Barchu. Okay, so let's everybody take out the siddur. I forgot to take mine down, but I've got it right here, I think. Yeah, weekday siddur. Okay, and turn to Pezukei de Zimra. I don't know if you're able to see this, but this is the last page of the Pezukei de Zimra. We turn the page and there is a Kaddish here, okay? And like I said, we're going to ignore that Kaddish for now. The next thing you see is an invitation called Barchu. Barchu is literally a call to worship, which is why it is said before the blessings preceding the Shema. Remember, the Shemona Esrei constitutes the essence of prayer, and the Shema is a Torah commandment. When the morning service was initially established, it consisted only of the Shema, with its blessings, and the Shemona Esrei. All the other prayers used to be said privately at home or individually at the synagogue. And so when the Chazan, or prayer leader, was ready to commence the communal prayer service, he would begin with this call to worship. Barchu is recited in the Shacharit, or morning service, and the Ma'ariv, or evening service, but not the Mincha, or afternoon service, because the Shema is not recited during this service. So the Barchu is also said by each person who is given an aliyah to the Torah in shul, and it's followed by the response, which we'll see shortly. So if you're in shul on Shabbat morning, you'll respond to the Barchu in Shacharit right before the Shema blessings, and each of the 8 times that someone is called up to the Torah. Barchu is not said during Musaf, which is the additional Shabbat prayer service, or Mincha. So everybody now, if you haven't already, turn to Barchu in your siddur, which should look like this. You see the main line there, which is the call to worship. Okay, and this will be found, as I said, immediately after Pezukei de Zimra, at the beginning of the section marked blessings of the Shema, or the Shema and its blessings, or something like that. Okay, the Barchu invitation is said while standing, but only in the presence of a minyan. So if you're praying alone, when you get done with Pezukei de Zimra, you skip Barchu. Okay, if you're praying alone and not in a minyan, when you get done with Pezukei de Zimra, you skip Barchu and go straight to the blessings of the Shema, which we will look at in just a minute. If you're in a minyan, the Chazan says, Barchu et Adonai Hamavrach, which means praise Hashem, who is to be praised. Now, you may not be able to see him, but he is bowing at the word Barchu and straightening up at Hashem's name. After he says that, the congregation, that's you and me, responds, Baruch Hashem Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed, which means, blessed is Hashem who is to be praised forever. While we say that, we bow at Baruch and we straighten up at Hashem. Now, the Chazan then repeats what we said, Baruch Hashem Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Then we sit to say the blessings which precede the Shema and the Shema itself. They're all said sitting down. Now, the prayers that precede the Shema, in those prayers, there are a couple of lines which are said out loud. The first one occurs after the 3rd prayer, and it says, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot Milo Kol Haaretz Kivodo. Then there is one line said normally, followed by the line Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo, or Adonai Mimkomo. Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimkomo. Two more brachot, and then we come to the Shema. The seventh column on our chart adds the rest of Pezukei de Zimra. The eighth column adds Aleinu. So the first standing prayer, if you will, that we're talking about today, because today's class is called the three standing prayers. So the first one was the Barchu, and now we're going to look at Aleinu. So Aleinu is basically the last prayer in Shacharit. The Aleinu is said during all three prayer services, plus after blessing the new moon, and at a Brit Milah, or bris. It's an old prayer. One tradition attributes it to Joshua, and others to the men of the Great Assembly. But either way, it's an old prayer, and it's comprised of 2 paragraphs, and it is said standing. There are 2 reasons for this. The first reason is the content, and the second is that originally the Aleinu was actually part of the Amidah on Musaf on Shabbat. When it was taken out of the Musaf Amidah, of course, if it was part of the Amidah, then we would say it's standing, because we say the whole Amidah, or Shemona Esrei, standing, right? So when it was taken out of the Musaf Amidah and inserted into all 3 daily services, the standing position for reciting it was maintained. Now, you may notice that in many sidders, the third sentence is written in parentheses. So I'm actually going to encourage everybody to try to find the Aleinu. So it's after the Shema and after the Shemona Esrei. Hang on, I just want to get there so I can direct you correctly. Okay, so immediately after the Shemona Esrei, you have a Yehi Ratzon, may it be your will, and then you have something called Tachnun. So we skipped past Tachnun. In my siddur, the next thing is Avinu Malkeinu. We skipped that. That's actually part of Tachnun. Okay. You go to the end of Tachnun, which is a little bit on the long side. It's not terribly long, but you have a half Kaddish. Then you have the removal of the Ark and Ashrei. You have to go all the way to the end of Shacharit. After the song of the day, and Ein Kelohenu, there's another Kaddish, and then you come to Aleinu. Okay, Aleinu looks like this. Not that that makes it any easier to find, but Aleinu, like I said, is pretty much the last prayer in Shacharit. All right? There are actually a couple of things that come after it, but that's not, Aleinu basically is the last prayer of Shacharit. When you look at the Aleinu, you may notice, and if you're watching this by video and you haven't found Aleinu yet, you should probably pause it and then go find it and then continue, because you'll want to see that the third sentence of Aleinu is in parentheses. All right? And that is because some customs actually leave this line out. Most don't. Most Orthodox customs do include it. And the line says in English, they worship vanity and emptiness and pray to a God who cannot save. So although this line has always been included in Sephardi sidders, many Ashkenazi sidders actually censored it. About a century after this prayer was incorporated into the daily liturgy, around 1300, an apostate Jew known as Pesach Peter denounced it as a secret anti-Christian slur, claiming that the wording was secretly referring to Jesus. Because of this, Christian authorities throughout Europe censored the line, forcing it to be omitted from the prayer. But it wasn't omitted in Sephardi communities. Keep in mind that Sephardi communities were not, for the most part, predominantly Christian communities. They were, for the most part, predominantly found in Muslim areas rather than Christian areas. So they didn't bother to take it out, but many Ashkenazi sidders did. And many Ashkenazi sidders today do include it. In fact, I would say most. Aleinu has a tune, and it's usually sung. Because it's basically the second most frequently recited prayer in the synagogue, children memorize it at a very young age. Now, if you've ever been in shul when they get to the Aleinu, you may have noticed that the congregation gets through it so quickly, you're positive they must be skipping the second paragraph. But it's not the case. They just say it so fast because, like I said, anybody who was raised in the Jewish community began to learn it at a very, very young age, okay? So they just say it so fast that it's impossible for normal people to keep up. So even though I learned the Aleinu when I was in 4th grade, I still can't and purposely choose not to say it that fast. My goal is to finish the first paragraph by the time the congregation has finished the second. Okay, so we're saying that it's taking me twice as long to say as it takes other people. And then the Aleinu is followed by a Kaddish. So what I personally do is I complete the second paragraph while the congregation is saying Kaddish. In fact, it's still kind of a stretch for me to even finish it that quickly. So whether you say the third line or not, the next line says, we bow our knees, we bend our knees, bow and give thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed is He. So while we're saying we bend our knees, we actually bow. If you happened to have grown up Reform, you probably learned the first paragraph to a tune that ended with V'ne'emar V'haya Hashem L'melech al kol haaretz B'yom hahu yiyeh Hashem echad Shmo u'shmo u'shmo echad. And I'm not singing it for modesty reasons, but you can probably, if you learned this as a child, you will be hearing it as I'm saying it. You'll be hearing the tune in your head. So for some reason, that's the version that I learned as a child, and I didn't even know there was a second paragraph until I became religious. And if you're davening in a minyan, you may even hear some people sing that line before leaping into the Kaddish that comes immediately afterwards. Okay, speaking of leaping into Kaddish, what is Kaddish? So first of all, what does Kaddish mean? Sanctification. That's what Kaddish means. And it comes from the word holy, right? Kadosh. The Kaddish is a prayer whose entire focus is the magnification and sanctification of God's name. Now, there are several forms of Kaddish. Most people are familiar with the mourner's Kaddish, but there is also the half Kaddish, the whole Kaddish, the rabbi's Kaddish, and there is a special Kaddish said at a funeral called the Kaddish after a burial. And there's also a special Kaddish said at a siyum, which is a special meal and celebration after the completion of learning a tractate of Gemara. That version is called the Great Kaddish because it's the longest. Sephardim do not use that version at a siyum, but the version called the Rabbi's Kaddish. Now, all of the versions of the Kaddish begin with what is called the half Kaddish. So you always do the half Kaddish, and then some of the versions that you do at different times have added parts. You may notice that the half Kaddish is said several times throughout the Siddur, but it's only ever said in the presence of a minyan. Okay, something important to remember. It doesn't matter what version you're saying. If somebody decides that they want to say Kaddish for a parent that has passed away, or a child or a sibling, you have to find a minyan to say Kaddish in. Kaddish is not said unless it's in a minyan. All right, so that's just a little, you hear all the time, oh, I have to say Kaddish for my father. I'm going to say Kaddish for my father who just passed away. But it doesn't mean you just go off on your own and go say Kaddish. It means that you need to be in the synagogue every morning with a minyan to say Kaddish. And it's really interesting. I know that there are several people who were loosely affiliated Jewishly, that they knew they were Jewish, they were ethnically Jewish, they were connected to their Judaism in sort of a kind of remote kind of way. But they had a parent pass away, and they made a promise to themselves that they would say Kaddish for that parent. And so they found a shul where there was a minyan every morning that they could go and say Kaddish. And so they started going to the Shacharit service every day of the week for that year. And there are many, many stories of people who have returned to the Torah, who have adopted an observant lifestyle because of their experience of going to shul every morning and saying Kaddish. Okay, so it is not uncommon that this draws them closer to Hashem and becomes a catalyst for them to become more observant. But only the mourner's Kaddish is said specifically by mourners. And the mourner's Kaddish is said only by mourners. Okay? I don't know if that was clear. Only the mourner's Kaddish is said specifically by mourners, and the mourner's Kaddish is said only by mourners. If there is no mourner present in the minyan, it's not said. Although in some synagogues, if there's no mourner present, the rabbi will recite the rabbi's Kaddish in its place. Also, the obligation to say Kaddish falls only on the men because Kaddish is a time-bound and minyan-bound mitzvah. However, many women have taken on the obligation to say Kaddish for a parent, especially when there are no man in the family to do so. This is only really feasible, though, if they live in a community where there's an active daily minyan every morning. Other women will take on to, they'll do something else in the merit of this loved one that they have lost instead of saying Kaddish because it just won't work for them. So they'll take on to learn in the merit of their parent or whoever for that year of mourning. So instead of attending a minyan, they set aside that time each day to learn a book or subject in the hopes that their learning will help elevate the relative's soul as the Kaddish is thought to do. Now, because of the obligation to say Kaddish for a close relative who has died, the Kaddish is often referred to, by people who don't know, as a prayer for the dead. But besides making it sound an awful lot like some sort of pagan ritual, it's not at all accurate, as you'll see in a minute. In fact, it would be more aptly called a prayer for the living, as it is those of us who are left behind who feel the loss that must make the great effort to praise Hashem even in the midst of our pain. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Kaddish. So first we're going to start with the half Kaddish. If you open your siddur to the page with the Barchu, remember that's just before the beginning of the blessings for the Shema. So find the Shema. Once you find the Shema, you go back just a few pages more and you come to the Barchu. Okay, I think you can see that. Barchu. All right. So before the Barchu, okay, so that's the Barchu, and right before the Barchu is the half Kaddish. Okay? All right, so just before, if you open your siddur to the page with the Barchu, just before the beginning of the blessings of the Shema, you're going to see this half Kaddish. In my siddur, the Kaddish is written in a smaller print, but it begins with the word Yit Gadal, okay? May he be exalted, he will be exalted, it will be exalted, grow exalted. Any of those might be the translation that you're going to see in your siddur, okay? So the congregation stands during Kaddish. We always stand during Kaddish. And out of respect, even if you are not personally davening at the time, it is the Ashkenazi custom that if you are in a room where Kaddish is being said, you stop what you're doing and you be quiet until the recitation of the Kaddish is finished. The Sephardi custom is that only those who are actually participating in the minyan are required to stand and respond. In addition to standing and listening to the Kaddish, those who hear it are supposed to respond at certain points in the Kaddish. So let's look at the half Kaddish in our siddur, and we're going to read through the half Kaddish and its responses. Okay? So what it says in Hebrew, the first line says, Yitkadal v'yitkadash shamei Rabbah. May his name be exalted and sanctified. May his great name be exalted and sanctified. Now, at that point, the congregation says, Amen. And it should be printed in your siddur. It should say Amen after that line. Okay? Be'alma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute v'yatzmach purkane v'alma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute v'yatzmach purkane v'karev Mashiach. Now, one of the first things you probably will notice if you do know Hebrew is that this prayer is not in Hebrew. It's in Aramaic, which is why it's a little bit harder for me to read. And that's because at the time it was written, Hebrew was only used for prayer and by religious scholars, and Aramaic was actually the spoken language of the masses. So it was decided that the prayer should be said in the language of the people so that they knew what they were saying. So that second line, the English translation is, in the world that he created according to his will, and may he give rain to his kingship and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah. Amen. Okay, so the chazan, or the prayer leader, is saying all of this, and the congregation is responding Amen. So we respond Amen after Shmei Rabbah, and we respond Amen after Mashiach, Messiah. And then the last line of that first paragraph says V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. And anytime you hear v'imru Amen, you respond Amen. So they didn't put that in parentheses there. So it says, in your lifetimes and in your days and in the lifetimes of the entire house of Israel, swiftly and soon, and in the time that comes soon, and everybody respond Amen. So because I broke it up, it's a little hard to follow, but it's basically saying, may God's name be sanctified in the world that he created according to his will, and may he give reign to his kingship and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in our lifetimes and in our days and in the lifetime of the entire family of Israel, swiftly and soon. Amen. Okay? So nothing in there is about death, right? Even though it's considered like this prayer for the dead, it's not. All it's saying is, may God's name be exalted. So then after that first paragraph, the congregation replies, Amen. Like I said, because it's a v'amru Amen. We say Amen, and then we say the next line. Now, if you can see in my siddur, which I don't know if you can, because it has the English, it says, and the congregation responds. Okay? So we say, Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivarach Leolam Ome Omaya. May his name that is great be blessed forever and to all eternity. And then the Chazan continues. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Leolam Ul'olmei Olmaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei Dekudusha Brichu. Okay? So I'll stop there because then there's a Brichu. May his name that is great be blessed forever and all eternity. Blessed, praised, glorified, exalted, upraised, honored, elevated, and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed is he. And we respond, blessed is he. Okay, so far, all this is basically doing is saying God's great in a bunch of different ways, right? And may everybody recognize that he's great, and may he be exalted in everybody's eyes. Okay, after Brichu, it says, Le'ela min kol berchata b'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Beyond any blessing and song, praise, and consolation that are uttered in the world, and now say, Amen. Okay, so that's the half Kaddish. Now, again, all of the Kaddishes that are found in the Siddur start with that half Kaddish, okay? Now, before we finish up for this section, the full Kaddish, or the Rabbi's Kaddish, depending on your Siddur, but depending on the Nusach, the tradition that your Siddur is following, it is found right before Aleinu. Now, we talked about Aleinu, right? That was the last thing that we talked about. So the Aleinu, right, was the last prayer of Shacharit. So turn now very quickly back to the Aleinu at the very end of Shacharit. And after you find Aleinu, you will find the mourner's Kaddish. And again, if the siddur that you're using is labeled, it says at the top the mourner's Kaddish. Like I said, in some cases you have the rabbi's Kaddish instead. But if there are any mourners present in the minyan, they say the mourner's Kaddish. Okay, so it starts with the same half Kaddish. All right, it starts with Yid Gadal, Yid Kaddish, Shemei Rabbah, and everybody says Amen. And it's interesting because God's name is not actually mentioned in the Kaddish, which is really fascinating. I mean, it talks about his name, but it doesn't actually say his name. All right, so you have the half Kaddish, and then I believe that's where the half Kaddish stopped, and then the mourner's Kaddish adds the line, Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Tovim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen. May there be peace that is abundant from heaven and life that is good upon us and upon all Israel, and now respond Amen. So again, there's still nothing in there about death. The mourners add this concept of peace because that's the thing that mourners need. The Kaddish is not about the dead person. The Kaddish is about us and us finding comfort in the fact that God is great and God is faithful and he is eternal and he does everything that he's supposed to do and he'll take care of us too. And recognizing that because of those aspects, those attributes of who God is, that even though we are grieving over this loss, we have to believe that there's a reason that it happened, right? We have to believe that somebody's in charge. He knows what he's doing. He sees the bigger picture, and he understands why it was necessary for us to lose this person when we did. Now, that doesn't make it less painful. It means that we have to acknowledge that there is a God and he is great and he knows what's going on, and it's okay to ask him for peace. Now, the full Kaddish or Rabbi's Kaddish, depending on your siddur, is found right before Aleinu. So this was right after Aleinu. So if you go backwards a page, you'll see it says Aleinu in your siddur. And if you go to the beginning of the Aleinu, you find the Rabbi's Kaddish. Okay? Now, the Rabbi's Kaddish is just a little bit longer. So, if you've ever noticed them saying Kaddish several times, again, it's because of these different versions. So, if you look at the Rabbi's Kaddish, it starts with Yid Gadal v'Yid Kaddish, just like all of the others did. It continues. It includes the line, Le'ela min kol berachata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'helma v'imru amen. But after that amen, then there's a long paragraph, and there's a couple more places where we say amen. And then it ends with Osei Shalom b'mramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'imru amen, which is how we also end the Shmona Esrei. He who makes peace in his heights, may he in his compassion make peace upon us and upon all Israel, and respond amen. So those are what I called the three standing prayers. All right, so that's basically the content of the class for today. I wanted to keep it just to the three standing prayers. And I want to know, does anybody have any questions regarding either Barchu or Aleinu or the Kaddish? Okay, great. So that's all that we have for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Part of the reason that some of these classes are shorter is because when I teach them live and I have students who are asking questions about bowing or about something else, so then obviously each class takes longer. So a class that I prepared for an hour class live does not take a full hour when I'm teaching it in this format where nobody's interrupting me. So, all right, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to being with you next week. Everybody, take care.